Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to convene today's meeting of the Labor Committee on this Tuesday, March 21st. First, I'd like to see if there are any remarks from my co-chair, Senator Kushner.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to get started.
Representative Acker.
Ready to get to work, Mr. Chair, and we have one member like as yours that's in other committees at this time. So
Great. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Looking forward to a productive day and good conversation about a lengthy agenda. I am a little concerned that this agenda represents what I believe to be a significant impact to the business health of this state. But we will certainly have more on that conversation as we move along. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Wilson. All set. Good. So at this time, we'll go to item 3 on our agenda, bills for final action. We have 11 items on the agenda for final action this afternoon. Item 1 is SB 21, an act prohibiting employers from charging employees for training costs upon separation for employment. The motion is to JF to the floor. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Representative Wilson and Senator Kushner. So the purpose of this bill is to prohibit employees from requiring employment promissory notes on a condition of employment. Is there any discussion? Representative Acker.
thank you, Mr. Chair. And the only discussion I had was, and I'm not sure how this came to light in terms of the number of employees, but the municipalities said that one of their concerns was, a potential cost to them. And also that, they were concerned that this interacted and in a negative way with their collective bargaining in their testimony. And that's kind of my pause on this legislation. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Chair?
I totally understand the sentiment. At this time, I'm looking at just my notes that I have before me. And as I can see, this requires employees to either stay at that job for a certain duration or pay the employees to leave their job early. So just in terms of the current law, and it prohibits at least 26 employees, and the bill expands it to cover all employees. And if you're asking about costs associated, correct, sir?
Yeah, I think, well, because if they had a, if they collective bargaining, let's say a small community Department of Public Works kind of thing, and maybe there was some training, and that's the only reason that was the only thing that I read that, other than the fact that we're moving it from, employers of 26 to smaller companies. Sure. That was the only thing that rose to my attention during the testimony that was presented to us.
As written, I don't see a number threshold associated with the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions, comments? Senator Sampson, I apologize.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at this bill, just for people listening, what this bill would do would prohibit employers from requiring employees to repay them for training if that employee leaves the job after there was some sort of agreement that training would be provided, and typically in exchange for some length of service kind of arrangement. I'm curious because employer-employee agreement is something that is traditionally, bargained for by those individuals. Can you tell me what the state's interest is in prohibiting this conduct, Mr. Chairman?
I would Senator Kushner, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think that the state has an interest always in regulating conditions and standards, setting standards for how we employ people. And we've been doing that for generations. Fortunately, it's how we got to eliminating child labor and other, serious offenses by employers. In this case, we have heard that there is some recognition that employees may be feeling that they have no option but to sign an agreement in order to gain employment, and this would restrict employers from doing that, an agreement that would require them to pay back training costs. I think, you know, we have had this conversation before about whether or not there should be, whether every employee has the ability to bargain their terms and conditions of employment when they get hired. And that really sounds good in theory, but in reality, it's a very uneven playing field. The balance of power is really most often with the employer having more of a power relationship. Workers don't really have that much choice when they have to pay their bills and pay feed their families. So this just would prohibit that kind of a practice.
Well, I appreciate that answer, Madam Chairman. I don't agree with anything that you've just said. First off, the comparison to child labor when we're talking about a situation where an employer is offering an incentive to an employee to maybe give them a maybe life transforming skill, to me is not the same thing as, putting children in a coal mine. And I find it remarkable that bills that I believe are detrimental to creating opportunity and will benefit people are somehow characterized as helping them. This bill doesn't help a single person. This bill is going to prevent commerce, activity, employment, and opportunity. That's what this bill does. And I think that is something that so many of the bills on today's agenda have in common, which is that if people are looking for an excuse or a reason not to do business in Connecticut, I think today's agenda is something that might be a tipping point, because the collection of bills on this agenda are clearly targeting employers in a way that I think is unfair. The fact is that employers are job creators, and without employers in our state, there are not going to be jobs and opportunities for the people that this committee is supposedly looking out for. In this particular bill, what is going to happen is that everyone from a machine shop that wants to offer someone the ability to develop a high-paying career in a manufacturing industry by learning how to operate a specific type of machine or something like that is not going to be given that opportunity, because we're going to be telling that business that you can no longer put this type of requirement on an employee. The issue is that, as far as I can tell from this bill, it doesn't even allow this activity to happen voluntarily. And to me, that's the only way it would happen anyway, is if it happened voluntarily. So what are we doing here exactly to tell people that want to engage in this activity for their mutual benefit that they cannot? Maybe that's a better question. I asked what the state's interest in his legislation is, but what is the state's interest in interfering with this activity if both parties want to engage in it voluntarily?
Thank you, Senator, through you, Mr. Chair. I do think that the state has a responsibility to set standards and minimum standards, and I think that's what this is. And so, maybe the child labor, I think that was coming from previous conversations. I didn't even expect to say that. But I often think about the idea of why should the state regulate or interfere in the relationship between an employer and an employee, which, we've discussed many times. And in those conversations, it always struck me that if we hadn't done that a long time ago, that we would be facing some really very bad policy choices today. So I think that it really is no different than other areas where the state sets minimum standards.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the answer. But again, a minimum standard to me is, requiring public safety, reasonable working hours, not interfering with opportunity in a voluntary agreement. This, as I described, is a situation where you have people who are simply making a promise to an employer to work for a period of time once an employer agrees to make a capital investment in them. I don't see any reason why we would want to deprive either the employer or the employee of such opportunities. Many of them exist right now. There are municipalities that offer training for employees, college education, things like that. And here we are, we're going to tell those folks, no, that activity is no longer allowed. There's going to be a theme throughout today's conversation. And that's going to be about the notion that we are not creating minimum standards. Minimum standards, as I said, are minimum standards that we would expect the state government to provide, which is for the public safety and reasonable working conditions. It's not to interfere in private contracts in ways that limit opportunity for the parties. The problem with doing this type of thing and limiting that type of opportunity is you are just slowing down the growth of the quality of life in this state. And we're witnessing it. We've watched these policies year after year lead to businesses choosing different states to relocate to, less and less employment opportunities. And yet we keep coming back in this committee with more and more regulation and policy that is detrimental to employers, and sometimes written in a way that almost forces them to try and work around your laws so that they can't. And the way they do that is by suggesting that maybe instead of crossing the threshold of having 50 employees and be subject to having some regulation, we'll keep it at 49, or other types of regulations. All of this slows down production. And I think that's dangerous, because the creation of wealth, even for people on the bottom of the income spectrum, happens when there is more wealth created in the world. I mean, in the United States, we have the highest quality of life of any place on the planet, and that is due to free market capitalism. That is due to people engaging in business and producing things. And when more things in the world are produced because there's the opportunity to make wealth, those things do in fact end up in the hands of people across the income spectrum. Even the poorest people in America are far better off than they are in other socialist countries across the planet. And I'm concerned. I wouldn't be making these comments right now. This is not grandstanding. This is genuine concern about the future direction of this state. I don't want more people to leave Connecticut. I don't want more businesses to leave. I don't want people searching for employment and not being able to find it, because this committee wants to compare interrupting someone's ability to get an education and a higher paying job with child labor. It's just not appropriate. And I'm certainly going to vote no on this bill, Mr. Chairman. And I would encourage my colleagues to think twice about the damage that is being done to our state's business climate and our future economy and the people that live here with each one of these bills that's on the agenda today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions? Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too would like to voice my concern with some of the bills on the agenda today, but we'll start with this one. In my business, over the years, we've had the opportunity to send employees. I've been myself to training, and it's a way to increase skill level. In some cases, in the business that I'm in disaster cleanup, you can't get the training isn't available in-house. It's not available in the state of Connecticut even. Now, we at times have paid for employees to get on a plane, for which they're taking time away from their families and their normal routine. And it's a shared sacrifice, if you will. And in return, as the business owner, we're paying for travel expenses, lodging, meals, plus the cost of the training. And then you got the loss of productivity of that employee for the time that they're out, and other people are covering for them, him or her. So this could be 3 to 5 days or more where they're away, but it's a mutual agreement, and the employee is taking a risk, certainly, or maybe I look at it as a matter of inconvenience, and certainly the employer is taking a risk to not have that employee available during that time for training. And I use that as an example because I think both are entering into this willingly. It's an opportunity for the employee to better him or herself, gain skills that just you cannot get on the job. And it's an opportunity for the employer. I know when I'm as an employer, I'm stating to my customers that, hey, I've got some of the best trained staff that you can get because we invest in our employees. And so to now put the force of government coming in again to interject where it really doesn't belong, has no business, is concerning to me. I think that it may make some employers think twice about even offering that training and taking those risks if there's not a chance that you can even have that discussion and certainly looking for a commitment at the very least, looking for a commitment from that employee. I'll refer back to testimony from Senator Duff, who talked about in his testimony back in January. He talked about some employers who are charging employees for training that wasn't administered. I think that's a totally different thing. You're not talking about fraud. I think if you wanted to carve out a place in this bill where you've got employees who were charged for training that was not received, totally different from, I think, than the spirit of this bill. So I have to oppose this. I think, again, we're interfering in a relationship between most of the time an amicable one between an employee and an employer. As an employer, I can't tell you the amount of times I've had to be flexible and willingly been flexible to accommodate the needs of my employees. And when I needed the employees to step up and show up, they return that favor. And it's a great relationship to have when you can count on the other party to help you out in a time of need. We live in this is an at-will relationship. We have an at-will state. An employee can leave at any time. And so to say that an employer could be expected to shell out $5,000-$10,000 in training and have no expectation of having a return, none, having a return on that investment is very concerning to me. And once again, we're in the bottom 1 or 2 economic environments in the entire country. And it's policies like this that keep us there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Weir. Any further questions? Discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Clerk, will you call the roll?
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 1, Senate Bill number 21, an act prohibiting employers from charging employees for training costs upon separation from employment. The motion is to JF this bill to the floor. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera,
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson,
Sampson votes no.
Representative Ackert,
No.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weir is no.
Representative Yakarino. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is this on? Thank you. Mr. Clerk will discuss how long we'll leave the votes on at the end of the meeting. Moving on to item 2, SB 152, an act concerning the protection of warehouse workers. The motion is to JFS to the floor. Do I have
Rep. Hughes so moved.
moved by Representative Hughes, seconded by Senator Kushner? So the bill broadens the employers, sorry, that's the S language that I wanted to speak to. This bill limits the extent to which certain employers can require their employees to meet production quotas. It applies to employers that employ at least 100 employees at a single warehouse distribution center and to 1,000 employees on an aggregate at multiple warehouse distribution centers in the state that are owned and operated by the same business entity. The S language, LCO 6218, broadens the employers covered by the bill to include third-party employers and contracts who control employees at a warehouse, broadens the definition and quotas of covered by the bill, makes couriers and express delivery service establishments covered employers if they meet the employee thresholds, requires covered employees to provide quota or personal work speed data in English, an employee's primary language, requires covered employees to maintain their records for 3 years, establishes the conditions to rebut the bill's rebuttable presumption, and allows for the DOL civil penalty and employees to bring a civil action without further exhausting the administrative remedies. Any discussion? Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few questions on this bill, but I might start just by suggesting that this is another bill that effectively will harm business interests in this state and the opportunity for workers looking for employment. It's interesting to me that this bill is more or less targeted at warehouse workers, and it seems intended, in fact, to single out specific employers. And I can only assume that the reason why this legislation is before us is really to drive a wedge between the employers and employees, and maybe encourage, certain organizations that are not currently union shops to consider that. The Department of Labor commissioner had a lot to say about this bill. And I don't have her testimony in front of me. I don't remember whether she outright said that she didn't support the legislation, but she did bring up quite a few concerns. One, that the tracking and just the data tracking that is necessary to facilitate this policy is immense and would require additional staff for the Department of Labor, certainly a cost to the state. There was also references to the sections pertaining to OSHA. The Connecticut OSHA certainly has a relationship with the other state agencies, but this is the federal OSHA. And as a result, the Department of Labor in the state of Connecticut doesn't have any real jurisdiction. So some of the sections of the bill, I don't know if they are workable as a result. Just breaking down the bill a little bit, section 1, subsection 4 establishes the definition of quota, which is basically the operative word throughout the bill that makes a determination of whether or not employers are in violation of the policy. Section 3 says no employee shall be required to meet any quota. And it goes through preventing compliance with meal periods, bathroom breaks, and so forth. I thought one item in that section, it's on line 63, was interesting. It says no employee shall be required to meet any quota that, number 4, measures total output over an increment of time that is shorter than 1 day. And I found that to be curious because I know that in many employment arrangements, employees are asked to do things, in 1 day. I need you to go make these 100 copies. I'd like that back in 15 minutes. Is that the type of thing that we're getting at here? I'm just a little confused about whether or not we are restricting employers from asking their employees to do work as a result of this policy, and specifically with reference to that section. I wonder if you have an answer for me, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I think in some of the testimony that we heard, it was folks being required to meet quotas while trying to maybe walk 20 minutes to get to a bathroom and being held responsible for that period of time in real-time work. And that primarily, I think, drove this language, and not just the bathroom breaks, but the meals as well.
Well, I can certainly appreciate that, but it says or. So effectively, it says that no employee shall be required to meet any quota that measures total output over an increment of time that is shorter than 1 day. I don't think that's a workable policy in any business arrangement. I think employees in certain businesses are asked to do things all the time that are going to take less than 1 day. And I think a policy that suggests that they can't, or at least creates the unnecessary concern over whether they're in violation is a concern. And I'll just add to that comment by saying, you know, that's part of the danger of policies like this. These things have a chilling effect on people wanting to do commerce in the state of Connecticut. You know, we already have a reputation as a state that is hostile to business, that employers are often on the losing side of disputes, even if the facts are on their side. And you know, what bugs me more than anything is sitting on this committee as a member of the minority. I often end up taking the position of the employer in each one of these situations, but I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on the side of fairness. I'm on the side of equality. You know, the fact that, you know, an employer-employee arrangement is a private agreement between those participants. But the fact of the matter is the bills that come through this committee, including this one, are hostile to business, and overtly so. Even if this does not become law in its current fashion, it is going to have a chilling effect on people wanting to engage in this type of business operation. I remember a couple of years ago, we were trying to encourage Amazon to put its largest facility in Connecticut. We were vying for that. And yet this is an outright, you know, shot across the bow at Amazon. And I don't know why anyone would want to do that in this state. I don't remember seeing a front page story in a newspaper in recent years about a large business coming to Connecticut. Those front page stories are always about businesses leaving Connecticut. And that's unfortunate. And this bill is one of the reasons why those things happen. Here's some more language that I consider to be extremely hostile. It says no employer shall take any adverse employment action against an employee for failure to meet the requirements above, including that measures total output over increment of time that is shorter than 1 day. And then it says if a current or former employee believes that meeting a quota caused or will cause a violation. So we're empowering employees based on their own belief, not any documentary evidence or any actual statement of fact to file a complaint. And then it goes on in subsection 2, it says an employer that receives a written or oral request for information under the section. So the employer can receive a request from an employee for documentation about what was required of them as far as a quota. And this goes on to say that the employer, if they receive a written request, has to provide it in written form within 5 calendar days, which I don't know if you mentioned that was one of the changes from the substitute language, but the original bill was 3 weeks. So I'm curious about the reason for the change from 3 weeks to 5 days. But my main concern here is now you're talking about an oral request. So no documentation of such a request. And yet what happens is if the employer fails to provide this information and there is a dispute about it, which is covered in subsection D, starting on line 103, it effectively says that there's a rebuttable presumption that adverse employment action was taken in violation of this section. So you're really putting the employer behind the 8 ball, because now it's a his or her debate over what really happened or when such a request was made. Such presumption may be rebutted only by clear and convincing evidence. I don't know how, Mr. Chairman, we can have policy like this. The Connecticut is an at-will employment state. Either party can terminate the agreement anytime for no reason. And yet we're creating reasons all over the place in this language, and we're creating liability, and we're creating a hostile situation. And something I've mentioned many times in this committee, you are furthering a basically the myth that somehow every employer-employee relationship is an adversarial one. And that is not true in most cases. I mean, I've worked for many, many people over the years, and I've had people work for me, and we were always on the same team for the same purpose, trying to make ourselves more successful. Every bill makes this assumption that somehow there is an evil employer who is trying to impose some unbelievable requirement on their employee. Well, the employee can leave. The employee can leave. They have free will to do so. You mentioned earlier, Madam Chairman, that you know, this is sometimes it's not an equal arrangement, that the leverage is on the side of the employer. That may be true in some cases, but the employee also has a tremendous amount of leverage. And a lot of times it's in situations where an employer is counting on an employee to fulfill an obligation that they've made as a business. They can put the employer in a lot more of a bind than the employer necessarily can. That's why we have at-will employment. That's why we have private contracts. That's why we have freedom, to be more specific, for people to engage in these types of business arrangements with one another. Line 118, it says an employee who believes an employer violated any provision of this section may file a complaint with the labor commissioner. So again, if they believe, wouldn't you need to have some sort of documentation to begin that process? And lines 132 talk about fines. So now we have the labor department responsible. I don't know that they even want to be responsible for this. I mean, that's another main question. Does the labor department really want to do any of this stuff? I don't think they do. And it says any employer who violates these provisions, $1,000 for the first violation, $2,000 for the second, $3,000 for a third, and subsequent, and so forth. So here we are. Now we have created a situation where a complaint can be filed based on a belief, and an employer can be fined for it. And then in line 137, now we're involving the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut. And I just don't understand why. Why does the Attorney General have to be involved in this situation? This is a minor labor dispute in an at-will contractual situation. There's no reason why the Attorney General needs to be involved in this. If there is a dispute, and the employer loses, it's already covered in lines 123 to 125 that they can appeal a decision. Like any party can appeal a decision to Superior Court. And I'm thankful that that's in there, rather than leaving the a state agency as cop, judge, and jury. I don't know. There's a lot more to say. There's a few more sections to this bill, but I think I've said my piece on it, Mr. Chairman, which is, again, this is just another bill that I don't know what its actual intent is. I don't know if this bill is really just to fire a shot in the direction of certain employers and certain corporations, or it's supposed to be some kind of substantive policy, but it fails certainly on the second count. It is not going to be workable policy. It will discourage people from operating in this state. And I think it makes a very confusing situation for both the employer, the employee. It creates more work that I don't think that the Department of Labor is equipped to handle. It will cost the state of Connecticut money, and it will create more litigation that I don't think is necessary in this type of situation. I don't see any state interest, and I don't see any benefit in this policy. And I encourage my colleagues to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions? Representative Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have similar concerns, but I'd like to get some clarification. So on who this is actually affecting. Lines 21 through 26 describes who it is, but do we know which, how many businesses this would be imposed on that outlines in this legislation?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Then lines 39 and 45 go on and discuss. So that brings me back. Where did the number 100 come from and 1,000? Was that was there discussion as these are the ones that we need to oversee, or what was the rationale behind the numbers that were specified?
1 second, Representative Senator Kushner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think these numbers come from an understanding of the relative size of these employers in our state. And while we don't have the exact information about how many companies or which companies might be impacted, I'm sure we could get that through a request to our nonpartisan staff, or at least get some estimates.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. I appreciate that because, it's over and over. We impose, like the first bill that we took today, there was a number that was derived of 26. And then we changed it. And there's a number in the past that was, employer size of 50, and then we've changed that legislation. So here we're picking a number and we're not really sure who it's going to affect or be imposed on. You can have all great companies that treat their warehouse employees fantastically that have more than 100, but maybe we have one that has 75 employees that maybe not so good. So sometimes the derogatory numbers bring me pause and question where the numbers came from. Then in section lines 39 through 45, similar again, it looks like what the warehouse distribution center or is there any, I guess maybe you have to look at and say what companies are fall under lines 39 through 45. Is it covering all warehouse centers or just the ones, or is that all warehouses in these lines, or is there some that are left out through you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's all of them, and to the numbers that were mentioned earlier of 100 employees in a single warehouse distribution, 1,000 in aggregate, and multiple warehouse distributions throughout the state.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, because I know that one of the a couple of the retailers that were out there that submitted opposition to this without knowing who they are. They may or may not actually fall into this category. I know there was a retail, some retail networkers that came out and said, they oppose this legislation. They may or may not fall under that. So because we did specific codes. Again, is it just, are we doing warehouses, or is it just the ones that fall under this code, and why under just those? So I'll wait to get information that you were going to provide on 100 and 1,000. So. And then in section, I guess just jumping down to 71 and 72, it's been asked, but I'm not sure we got the right answer on this, or I shouldn't say right answer, an answer that I understood. So if an employee is given the quota that they're required to do in a day or in a time frame, we'll say a time frame, we'll say a day, in a time frame, is the a action that the company could take be dismissal? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Can you repeat the question, Representative?
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. So I guess when you have an agreement, my point being, so you have an agreement that is going to be outlined so that employer says, okay, here's the job, here's what you have to meet for a quota, whether it's boxing or creating, whatever that warehouse does, I guess. And they don't meet that. So here's what you're supposed to meet in that given time frame. And you don't meet it. Because I'm looking at the words adverse employment action. So in many cases, you would think that being fired is an adverse employment action. So if they don't meet the quota, is it up? Can the employer, without fall under lines 71, 72, creating an adverse employment action, can they release that individual from employment?
I think as long as it doesn't interfere with meal breaks or interferes with employees using facilities and complying to OSHA, that they would be subject to termination.
Great. So in other words, if the employee is just not making, they're not making a quota, but they're taking their allowed lunch break, and they're allowed, if there's other breaks that are allowed during their, hirement, whether it's, using laboratory, and they don't meet the quota, then in that case, a separation is allowed. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Okay. Any further questions?
I think there was on line 101 and 102.
Yep.
each employer shall establish, so that part, so in that the establishment part, maintain and preserve true and accurate records for a period of 3 years. The employer's establishment of these records, wouldn't that be something that would be, if it's got to be regulated by Department of Labor, that they would provide? Or what records are they required to establish and maintain?
It's my understanding that a record of said quotas or any discrepancies that they may have in the event that the employee would like a report. And furthermore, if someone is to be fired, that those records be available, and that individual would have one opportunity to request that data.
So if that initial discussion of their quota, maybe the quota's changed throughout their hiring timeframes, that initial data that's presented to them is the data that they have. And if they are not making it, a record, essentially, you know, a service record or a performance record is maintained, kept, and then maintained for 3 years. Because I know that I've actually had a labor audit in my company. They come in and look at our, you know, literally, you know, all the work data that, you know, for the week or for the, you know, in this case, it was 3 years also, that they look at the labor records. So that would be part of that, probably that request by the Department of Labor. Is that correct?
I believe so.
That is it for right now, as I go through this JFS language. But thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just listening to my colleague, Representative Ackert, got me thinking that, you know, if we just, this is certainly geared towards warehouses, 100 employees or more, one location, 1,000, multiple locations. But I just think if we, just for the moment, the people in this room, all of us really gave consideration to applying this to other industries where we wouldn't have an expectation of productivity and an adverse employment action for not meeting productivity. I think right now, I was yesterday at my accountant's office, and he's got a deadline of April 15th. And I just can't imagine him coming to me and saying that I didn't get it done because, you know, I just didn't meet the quota, and I'm behind, and I have the IRS or the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services calling me because he's not going to be the one responsible, and having me feel really good about that when my CPA didn't meet a commitment. If we applied that to contracting, you know, having had people do work in my house, having been a contractor, farming, you know, hey, we're gonna let the vegetable season go into December because we didn't get it done. I can't imagine applying this logic. So leave it there. The other thing I notice is that we talk about employers 100 or more, 1,000 or more for multiple locations. And it just seems like it's punitive to the large business. And you know, I guess I understand why, based on what Senator Sampson mentioned, but I don't understand why we would allow this to occur. So it would be okay if a small contractor, a small warehouse could have these quotas, treat the employees in a similar manner. If we're alleging that this is poor behavior, why we would allow this to go on and only go after a large company with this behavior. And then I think I just think this is a slippery slope. In my town of Glastonbury, one of the towns I represent, we have a contractor who I've done a bunch of work with, American Ladders and Scaffolds, and they've got a warehouse. And they install equipment on trucks and sell ladders and all sorts of stuff. It's great to visit. And I can imagine if you know, I have an appointment to get my truck worked on and I'm waiting, and that they don't set a deadline, you know, for an employee when they're making a commitment to me that your truck will be done by the end of the day or by noon, and not to have some pressure to perform, some expectation of delivery. For me as the end user, you know, they're depending on their employees to meet a deadline. You know, I would imagine there's a, you know, there's an industry standard, there's understanding for what amount of work can be done in a certain period of time, and to set an expectation for that, I don't think is unreasonable. And I think, you know, going after a large corporation, large company, I don't understand why we would just well, number one, why we're so concerned in this body, what a private company does with their employees when they're meeting all aspects of the law and doing so in a safe manner. I'm not sure why we're involved in that, but then I'm further more concerned why we're picking one industry and one size business and targeting them. I'll leave it there. I have questions. So thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Kushner.
I feel like we're a little disconnected from the testimony we heard just a few weeks ago. And in that testimony, I remember being really astonished by the intensity of the work in, yes, it was a particular large warehouse operator that we all are familiar with. And I think that it was the first time that I really considered the intensity of the work and of the fact that the new technologies have made it possible to trace every movement of a worker from their station to the bathroom, to the break room, to picking up items and putting them in a box. And I think that it is incumbent on us to, as technology changes, as the workplace changes, to really recognize that we still need to make sure that workers are protected. And we heard about high levels of occupational safety and health violations in our state, much higher in these situations than in others. And I think that the attempt here is to begin to regulate businesses, much as it was done, long before this technology existed, through other means. And so, I would urge our committee members to vote for this bill today, because I believe it's really important that we begin to address the impact of technology, particularly in making sure that our workplaces are safe for the workers that are employed there. And, if there are specific issues that maybe we didn't get right that we need to look at, I know that always happens as bills move forward, but I feel very strongly that we're trying to approach this and really look at the modern world and the modern workplace and make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that workers in these settings have as much safety today as they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that we're not ignoring a problem that has developed right under our noses without any recognition of what's going on. So, I appreciate the witnesses that came forward and testified. I'm sure since that date, I know many of us probably have had those conversations with friends and neighbors and kids of friends and neighbors who've worked in these environments. I know I certainly did right after that at the dinner table, discover someone. And this is, to be clear, this is not about every corporation or employer is operating this way. In fact, many are not. They may have access to the technology, but they're not using it in that way. And this is really geared toward making sure that those who might be taking advantage of the technology and creating an unsafe workplace, that we have a way of enforcing standards that will keep, protect workers. So I strongly urge my colleagues here to consider this and to vote in favor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ackert, sorry.
And I want to just say that there's a piece of this legislation that I do support. And I think the senator just hit it, the safety component of it. I think that one of the things that we want to make sure of that we have a safe workplace, and no matter where it is, and that, one of the parts that I've always struggled with and it's not a knock against, OSHA, they're very busy, but having standards that are put in place and reviewed, if there is a higher level of incidents, that level should be reviewed and made sure it is safe. But but there's other components that I can't support at this time, and maybe as this legislation moves, there's areas that I would be supportive of, and we can have dialogue on that. So I thank you for the opportunity for the second time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Completely understand where some of the potential issues lie, and certainly willing to discuss it further after we voted out today, representatives and senators. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 2. Senate Bill 152, an act concerning the protection of warehouse workers. The motion is to JFS this to the floor. The LCO is 6218. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera,
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson,
Sampson votes no.
Representative Ackert,
No.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weir is no.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino is no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item 3, SB 228, an act concerning employees' loss of health care coverage as a result of a labor dispute. The motion is to JF to the floor. Do I have a motion? Moved by Representative Wilson. Need a second.
Second,
Second, to Senator Kushner. The purpose of this bill is to protect employees' health by ensuring employers have access to health coverage after losing coverage due to a labor dispute. What we're seeing is in terms of extensions, is the cover of all private sector employees, employers and employees, except for certain union construction contractors and employees. Broadening the range of family members of whom an employee may use the leave amongst a few others, and I'll just list one more, and broadening the reason employees may use the leave to include events such as employers closure due to a public health emergency discussion.
you're on the wrong.
I'm reading my wrong notes, everybody. I apologize about that.
It's about that.
All right, I'll reread that one. I apologize about that. So it's SB 228. This bill requires the Connecticut Health Insurance Exchange, i.e. Access Healthcare, to provide a special enrollment period for individuals who lose health benefits by an employer as a result of a labor dispute. The exchange provides health insurance plans to meet qualifications under the Affordable Care Act and are offered by insurance providers. Discussion. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just listening to the roll call a moment ago and then looking at the title of this bill and then taking a moment to kind of study the titles of all the bills. It reminds me why I put in a bill proposal every year to allow individual legislators to challenge the title of a bill, because every one of these titles is very much skewed in the way they are contrived. The bill in front of us says an act concerning employees' loss of healthcare coverage as a result of a labor dispute. Well, it's not a labor dispute. It's they're on strike. And we should say so in the bill title, because that's what the bill is about. The previous one said an act concerning the protection of warehouse workers. It could easily be stated to be an act concerning the overregulation of certain employers in the state damaging our economy. I mean, titles ought to reflect the truth of the matter and not imply a benefit without being truthful. And this one, no one wants to see anyone lose healthcare. And I'm very pleased to see the substitute language change this bill in an unbelievably dramatic way to the benefit. When Senator Looney testified on the original bill, I was really stunned that we were going to propose legislation that would require employers to pay for the healthcare coverage of striking workers. And I just, I was like, seriously, why not just require the employer to pay them if you're going to go that far? But I'm pleased to see that this bill has changed dramatically and now only requires that the Access Health creates an enrollment period for those striking workers. I do have a question though, Mr. Chairman, and that is that lines 184 and 185 say provide for a special enrollment period for individuals who lose health benefits provided by an employer as a result of a labor dispute. My understanding is that that's already current law. The current law refers to times when you are eligible for a special enrollment period, and they have a list of what they refer to as qualifying life events. And one of those is loss of coverage from an employer. So I don't know that this bill is necessary, Mr. Chairman. I'm pretty sure that this is covered under our current law. Maybe we could ask LCO or someone to take a look at that, but I'm quite certain that this is already current law, that you would be eligible based on a qualifying life event, loss of coverage from an employer, and we don't need to make a policy decision or create a new law for that purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. 1 second. If folks are having discussions in the room, could we just take them outside of the room? It makes it hard to hear the folks that are speaking. I apologize for that, Senator. Representative Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm in support of this legislation. I don't think anybody should go without health benefits. My only question would be how they're going to implement it. Let's say that there's a striking group, but it's just small in numbers, or how the notification takes effect. Is it just that a given individual can just say, I'm without healthcare for whatever reason. We'll say that I'm on strike and I'm without healthcare. Can that individual solely go and just, say, I'd like to enroll in the health plan, which I could, rather than being a group, I was hoping to be an individual could do that or family could do that. Would that be the way you would read this through you, Mr. Chair?
Thank you for your question. I'll defer to Senator Kushner. Thank you.
Thank you. I think labor dispute is defined elsewhere and understood to mean more than one individual. So I don't think it would be an individual just saying I'm having a labor dispute. Typically what we're really speaking to here, and if there's any concern, I'm sure we can clarify that, is a labor dispute that would involve a strike, which is when workers are typically denied their health care by the employer because they're out on strike. And so I think everybody knows that's the situation we're talking about. If there's any need to clarify it in some way, I'm sure we can get that advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would really like to know the answer to my question, because I would support this legislation, but I really don't think it's necessary. So if we can find out whether this is covered under current law, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly, Senator. We'll take a brief recess. Senator Kushner.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we are told that technically you may be, I don't know that you're technically correct. Technically, you're not correct. Let me put it that way. But let me explain it. Because technically, when a person goes out on strike, they have not lost their job. They are still considered employed by that employer. There could be an event where during a strike, an employer terminates all the employees. Under that circumstance where they no longer have a job, they might be entitled to the enrollment period that to enroll in Access Health. But technically, during a labor dispute, employees are still employed by the employer. So this would clarify it. So, if we didn't clarify it, could there be a court case on it? We might win it based on current law, possibly, but this would be a clarification that would make it clear that even though you might technically still be employed, you would have access to this during a labor dispute.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Chairman, for that response. I knew somehow there'd be no way that no matter what happened, I could found to be correct or let alone technically correct. That would be a quite an achievement in this committee. I will go along with your comments, and I will support the bill today. Although I will point out that if you refer to the Access Health website under qualifying life events, it has nothing to do with your employment status. It says that a qualifying life event could include loss of coverage from an employer. So nothing would preclude the employer from maintaining that insurance policy in effect. Maybe it's a very short duration, a labor dispute. So who knows? But I do think it's covered, but I will support the bill just in case it is not. And maybe we can find a better solution to this by more focusing on a clarification on the qualifying events portion of the Access Health policy rather than create an entirely separate, part of the law for it. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 3, Senate Bill 228, an act concerning employees' loss of healthcare coverage as a result of a labor dispute. The motion is to JF the bill to the floor. Senator Kushner.
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez.
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson.
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera.
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson.
Sampson is yes, technically.
Representative Acker.
Yes.
Representative Belton.
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall. Representative Hughes.
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser. Representative Weir.
Rep Weir is yes.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino votes yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item 4, HB 5854, an act concerning the number of wage and hour inspectors at the Labor Department. The motion is to JF to appropriations. May I have a motion?
Rep Hughes, so moved.
So moved by Representative Acker. I'll have you a second, Rep Hughes. Thank you.
Okay.
That works. And so this bill that's being sent would essentially requires Labor Commissioner to employ at least 45 wage and hour inspectors for purposes of investigating and ascertaining the wages of people employed in occupations that are paid hourly under the minimum wage law. There are a bunch of areas in which we will see the Labor Department or designated representatives has authority. One would be investigate and ascertain the wages of a person employed in occupation in the state, and I will entertain discussion. Representative Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know this has got to go to appropriations, I believe, but I think that one of the areas, just a couple areas that I think that the state of Connecticut could bolster up. That's the occupational licensing inspectors and then also the wage inspectors. So 2 areas. And I know it's a budgetary thing, but occupational licenses is one. There's two. There is some bad actors, not a lot of them out there, but if we could have a robust discussion on that maybe in the years to come also. But I just want to say that I'm in support of this legislation.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion made and seconded on agenda item 4. House Bill 5854, an act concerning the number of wage and hour inspectors at the Labor Department. The motion is to joint favorable to the bill to the Committee on Appropriations. Senator Kushner.
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez.
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson.
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera.
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson,
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert,
Yes.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weirs, yes.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now move on to item 5, HB 5858, an act concerning a study regarding the establishment of a flexible spending account program for child care expenses. The motion is to JF to the floor. Do I have a motion? So moved by Representative Wilson. Need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Senator Kushner. This bill requires the comptroller to conduct a study regarding establishing a flexible spending account program for residents of the state to use for incurred child care costs. The study will include, but at a minimum, the feasibility of administering a flexible spending account program similar to the dependent care spending account program for state employees. Any further discussion? Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I realize this bill has now been turned into a study, and I do also appreciate the change that this looks like it would fall under the cognizance of the comptroller rather than the Department of Labor, but I'm still going to oppose this policy simply on the grounds that I don't trust the state of Connecticut to manage anyone's finances, period, based on the way they manage their own finances. And there's no need for this. You know, people have the ability to save money, purchase bank accounts, purchase investments. Why we're competing with people in the private arena as far as retirement or any type of banking or money management tool doesn't make any sense to me. And this to me would be a disaster. I think that people managing their own money is going to have a net better result, simply because the fact that such a program might exist on a state level is going to have a cost, and that will interfere with their savings. And I just don't foresee that that's beneficial to the citizens of the state. There's no reason for this bill is the bottom line. We don't need any more government agencies. We do not need any more government management of private funds for private citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kushner.
Many years ago, there was a change in federal law that allowed flexible spending accounts to be created by employers so that workers could set aside monies out of their income, out of their wages, pre-tax dollars, to pay for certain expenses, and it included childcare and medical expenses. And this was a way to help workers deal with the cost and rising costs of insurance and out-of-pocket expenses and regular childcare expenses. And it's kind of a complicated system. You need to manage it carefully when you're a worker putting aside money, because if you don't spend that money, you lose it. But it is set aside in a separate account. Many small employers find it difficult to set up these accounts because there's a cost usually to have a third-party administrator, which is almost, I think, always necessary. And so it really, I like the proposal when I saw it come from one of our legislators, because I thought, oh, this would be a great way to offer a benefit to small employers that can't afford to set up a flexible spending account. However, it has been pointed out to us that there may be some restrictions on the state doing this because of the definition of employer and how they, they might not be able to do it and meet all the IRS requirements. So, I think it's good to study it and see if it's a possibility, because I think it would be a benefit both, not just to the workers, but to the small employers who might want to engage in something like this, but can't afford to do it on their own. So, that's why I'm in favor of a study on this issue, and it might take some time to figure it out, but if it can be done, I think it would be good for both parties, the employer and for the worker. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ackert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just, that was, I think the good senator just defined what what I was interested in is that, we have the ability to get, childcare costs pre-tax into an account and invest it in so that that individual or family could, have, some money to pay, because I've been a strong supporter of trying to make it more affordable for childcare. And it's just not. So if there's a way to create a pre-tax account, not sure if the state run is the focus. I just would like to see how we can accomplish it and help families put some dollars aside and help with their childcare costs. So I'm going to look forward to the study being done and then make my assessment on the program as it moves forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion made and seconded on agenda item 5. House Bill 5858, an act concerning a study regarding the establishment of a flexible spending account program for childcare expenses. The motion is to JF the bill to the floor. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera,
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson,
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert.
Yes.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weir is yes.
Representative Yacarino.
Representative Yacarino is yes.
I'm sorry, Representative Yacarino, could you repeat
Yes.
that, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We are going to hold item 6 and move on to item 7, SB 1120, an act concerning workers' rights. The motion is to JF to the floor. Do I have a motion? Moved by Representative Wilson,
Second.
seconded by Senator Kushner. This bill is to require the Labor Commission to study workers' rights in the state. This bill is a placeholder as well. Any discussion? Representative Weir.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that we at this point still have a dummy bill out here, something without study or not. I'm concerned. So just make that statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to comment on this bill, but Representative Weir just reminded me of something, which is last night I actually had a town hall meeting in the town of Prospect, actually, and I spent a large part of that meeting talking about the process up here and complaining, of course, about the lack of notice on public hearings, how we often are limited on the amount of time we have to review bills before they're debated and voted upon. The deadline being 6 p.m. the day before, and the majority has a tendency to use all of it. And sometimes being faced with substitute language and lengthy agendas and that kind of thing. But I will tell you that at one point in my town hall meeting, I mentioned to the people in the room that, we pass a great many of bills out of committee as works in progress, as bills that are not quite done, and there are dummy bills or placeholder bills. And I have to tell you, every person in this room, and there were people of all different political persuasions, probably 30 people or so, they were all very surprised and very much against that. Their interpretation is the same as mine, which is that the committee is the place where we are supposed to be getting our work done, where we're supposed to be debating the bills, making necessary modifications, and ultimately coming up with the final product to present to the House or Senate. And when we are passing bills out of committee that are still not complete, they're works in progress, it's bad enough. But when we have to just come up with titles to pass so that they can later be filled in with some sort of language, then effectively there is no committee process at all. And I jokingly say to people sometimes that that's all we do in the committees these days is we pass titles, because very often the bill will get to the House or Senate floor, and the first thing you will hear someone say is that they have a strike all amendment. It's not appropriate. We really should get back to doing our business the way it was intended. We should also try and work together to come up with beneficial policy for the state of Connecticut. I'm not saying that one party would be better than another if the circumstances were reversed. But that's no excuse. We all should endeavor to recognize that each one of us represents a significant number of people in the state of Connecticut, and their voices are what we are here, bringing to the forefront. And that regardless of the district someone serves in, or they're in the minority or the majority, every individual's voice should matter in the process. Anyway, I'm going to vote no on this because I just don't believe that we should be doing placeholder or dummy bills. We should be actually getting our work done and coming up with final language that we can present to the chambers in some sort of complete form. That's the only thing that's fair to the members, so that they have an idea of what's actually happening without having to guess at it. And that's what's fair to the public, so that they can actually track bills and legitimately know what is being debated. The number of people that contact me and they can't seem to figure out what bill we're debating because that bill hasn't been drafted yet, or it's in some sort of limbo kind of language, or, the bill that's online is not the right bill anymore because there's a substitute bill out there, but no one has access to it. I don't agree with any of that stuff. And the idea that we have a tendency to put bills through committee just for the purpose of filling in the blanks later, to me is unfair to the public. We should really reconsider that tactic. So I'll be a no. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion made and seconded on agenda item 7, Senate Bill 1120, an act concerning workers' rights. The motion is to JF the bill to the floor. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera,
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson,
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert,
No.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weir is no.
Representative Yakarino.
Yakarino is no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item 8, SB 1177, an act concerning one fair wage. Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved by Representative Wilson and seconded by Senator Kushner. Discussion? Well, let me summarize. I apologize. I didn't do that. So this bill removes the tip credit provision, which under current law allows employers to pay a sub-minimum wage to hotel and restaurant staff and bartenders who customarily receive tips, as long as the tips make up the difference. In doing so, it requires employers to pay these employees the full minimum wage. The S language, LCO 627, makes a conforming change. Discussion. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the breakdown of what the bill accomplishes. I think that's a good tactic, and I'm glad that we're using it. There's a lot to say about this bill, although there's not a lot of language before us. I mean, it's a very small bill from a standpoint of how it's drafted, but it makes a very considerable change in the policy of the state of Connecticut. And I've got significant concerns that this is not a positive policy. Many of the things I said earlier in this meeting apply to this bill. In particular, the notion that anytime we start drafting laws that inhibit the freedom of either employees or employers, or both of them, as is the case here, we risk limiting activity from occurring. And I think that that's the main danger here. I think there's two dangers. One is that I think that the people who work in jobs that will be directly affected by this policy, mostly wait staff, servers, bartenders, that kind of thing, I think that there is a very, very high probability that they will end up earning less at their jobs if this becomes law. I think that's number one. And number two, I think that there is a high probability that there will be less business activity in this industry as a result of this policy. And I'm just thinking about the minimum wage itself. And some of the remarks I made during that debate several years ago, and I think it's played out that way, which is to say that, you know, the minimum wage, you can debate its place in our list of laws that might meet what we talked about earlier as a minimum standard. But when that minimum wage gets to be beyond the realm of a minimum standard and into the realm of what people consider to be a living wage or things like that, I think you run a genuine risk of inhibiting access to employment and the creation of job opportunities. And that's what we've seen with the increase in the minimum wage, because effectively the minimum wage does not increase people's wages. And this bill regarding a one fair wage is not going to increase anyone's wages either. The government does not have the power to make policy to increase people's wages. It just doesn't. The fact of the matter is that people only pay the amount for things that they are willing to assign as a value. None of us in here would pay $50,000 for a $25,000 car. None of us would pay $100 for a pair of $30 sneakers. We're just not going to do that. And employers don't do it either. Employers do not pay people $14 or $15 an hour for a job that is worth $10. And as a result, what you're doing is you're eliminating that job that used to exist. Effectively, minimum wages create a ban on jobs. The job that pays $10 an hour is now banned in the state of Connecticut, even if the employer and the employee both agree and they want to have that opportunity for one another. It's banned. The state says, no, you can't do it. And that's the danger, because as the minimum wage gets beyond the realm of things that people would voluntarily agree to do, that activity ceases. And when economic activity ceases, it is the people on the lowest rung of the economic ladder that suffer. I can't say that more clearly. The fact of the matter is that the reason why we live in prosperity in this country is because wealth can be created via freedom and free markets and economic activity occurring. And every policy that is put forward by this committee, every impediment to that production occurring means that there is less wealth in the world. And when there's less wealth in the world, you know who has the least amount of it? The people at the bottom rung of the ladder. And this bill effectively is going to prohibit opportunity from existing. I've spent the last several weeks knowing that this bill is coming, and every chance that I got when I was out talking to people, I talked to a bartender a couple of days ago. I asked them, I said, you know, do you see this as a benefit? You know, and every one of them had an instinctual gut reaction that they liked the tip wage increasing. But then when we talked for a few minutes about how patrons are going to react, how business owners are going to react, what's going to happen with the way these transactions occur, they all, I think, immediately and instinctively became aware that they were in danger of making less money. And I think that's what's going to happen, because I think the typical person working in one of these jobs makes far more than the minimum wage when you combine their tip wage and their tips. And this will only serve to create new ways of doing businesses for employers. Restaurants are simply going to create a service charge instead of encouraging tips in their restaurant. They are going to suggest that the prices on the menu are going to increase, and effectively the wages for the wait staff, servers, and so on are included. And those numbers probably net far less than what they are making currently. And I don't know if that's something that we can we can prove ahead of time. But the one thing that we can be sure of is that if that was a business model that worked effectively, we would see it happening naturally in the marketplace. And there's no reason why establishments cannot engage in that type of activity currently. So all this bill does is it bans certain opportunities from existing. And when it bans certain opportunities from existing, it doesn't just ban opportunities for employers to exploit employees, as the majority would have you believe. It also bans opportunity for employees to have opportunity to create wealth and improve their station in life. And that is why I am always an advocate for small government. There are solutions created via the freedom of individuals to make choices and pursue their own happiness, as our founding documents say. So I don't know what's going to happen with this bill, but I think it's dangerous to do what I consider to be a social experiment effectively as a policy. I don't know that we have enough information. I don't know that there was enough testimony. I don't know that there is enough concrete evidence to suggest that this is going to be beneficial for anyone in this industry, whether it is employers or employees. I know that it is not beneficial for future opportunity. I can tell you that very clearly, because this is an impediment on the personal choice of the people involved. And another thing I'll mention is that, each of us up here, we are all representatives of our constituents, and that includes employers and employees and everybody else. But the fact of the matter is that every time we are presented with a bill that says that we are going to reduce the freedom of any of those people on any of the categories I mentioned, remember that you're voting against the freedom of your constituents to make and engage in activity voluntarily. There is a theme that comes from the majority on this committee, which is that every employee is forced into their situation. And I don't think that's accurate. I think that people have the freedom to choose their employment. They have the freedom to negotiate their employment. Look, it's not a perfect world. I'm not suggesting every employer is perfect and properly treating their employees, but that's why employees have the choice to shop around. And the marketplace solves these problems. If there's an employer who does not treat their employees well, does not pay them properly, does not treat them respectfully, then that's a message to someone else who might start a competing business across the street, that there is opportunity there to compete and to do better than that other business does. And that's what we should be leaving these decisions to, the marketplace and the freedom of our constituents that we should have respect for as their representatives. So I'll be a no on this bill today. I also, there's a lot more I could say. I will point out that the Department of Labor also had some commentary on this. In fact, somewhere I have their testimony, which says, quote unquote, and this is ironic, I didn't even read this ahead of time. It says, however, Connecticut Department of Labor is concerned that a potential unintended consequence of this proposal may result in customers tipping less, even at high-end establishments, and drive down those tipped workers' wages. That's straight from the commissioner of the Department of Labor. That's not just the ranking senator of this committee talking. I just don't think this is good policy. We should not be advancing this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll align my thoughts along with the senator, the good ranking senator. But there's areas that I can agree with on this legislation, and I want to point those out. As somebody that, does training, and I know we have a training wage. I know there's others that would disagree with me on this, that I think it's time that let's just make it a wage, right? So I agree with the deletion and changes in lines 12 and 13. In terms of, let's just make it, listen, I bring in a young person in and I'm training them, hopefully that my training will then move forward and be a value to my company and other companies. And also in lines 92 through 97, those rates, I know that. So my company, I hire a landscape company. And that landscape company is Horizons, and they hire those individuals with disabilities, and they come and I pay a little bit extra. Hopefully that's not going to lose their jobs over this, but talking with individuals that oversee that department, they say they'll find ways to find support for those individuals with disabilities so that they get paid against essentially the minimum wage, at least to do their work. And I think that's fair. If I'm going to hire somebody and bring them on, I just hope that it doesn't have a negative effect. My concern is that I don't want to put in legislation that will have a negative effect. So there's two areas that can be supportive of. I think the area that was just discussed for quite a while on the gratuity side, happened to go out and watch our wonderful UConn team last night, have a nice resounding win, and literally brought this to the attention to the servers. And they were not happy. They go, we're not happy with 638, but let me tell you, they already know that they have to make at least minimum wage. And I talked to one lady, she did lunch yesterday, and she said, I didn't do so well, but I already get minimum wage. I already know I get the wage that we're trying to have an accomplishment. She said, but the night before when she said, I did very well. I did very well per hour. So we all know that in this case, they can't make any less than minimum wage now, and that they have the opportunity when business is well to even do much better than per hour than they did. And I'll just let her know. So that doesn't want this to become legislation, but she said, if you're going to do anything, make it $25 an hour with health benefits. So we'll give you that. So, but that was their concern on it, and so I'll leave it at that I think that there's a couple pieces that if you want to move in a direction to improve individuals' pay, those two areas, I think that going away from the tip wage actually would reduce individuals' pay and drive costs up and possibly hurt our restaurants. As you know, I can tell you, in my restaurants in my community are now typically closed on at least Mondays and Tuesdays and possibly Wednesdays, just because of staffing levels. And then, that concern itself that it would have a negative effect on restaurants and also those that do large parties and events where they bring in staff, that they're allowed to do the same thing, hire individuals for staffing levels for their banquets and things like that. So and this time I'll be opposing this, and maybe that we can come to some common ground here and keep the two pieces that I'm in support of and move this legislation forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any further comment? Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity just to share a couple of thoughts on this. We heard from, obviously it was a very large number of people a couple of weeks back. And, I think in my experience when I'm out, this is an opportunity, when we're out to reward good service. And I think this bill flies in the face of that. I think it discards, it doesn't give any consideration for merit, for good service. I think quite frankly, it's confusing. It's going to be confusing to people going out. I think as my colleagues have stated, this could drive down wages. Another unintended consequences of us interfering in a process that's worked like this for a very long time. And so I'm concerned with our involvement in this process when if somebody doesn't earn, let's just say that's a bad night. It's one of those nights where it's snowing, the business stays open, the customers don't come in. That employee, as I understand it, is currently guaranteed minimum wage, correct, Mr. Chair?
I will defer that to Senator Kushner.
If an employee reports to the employer they didn't make minimum wage, they're required by law to do that. Pay that.
Thank you. Just wanted to make a clarification there that already at that point, if the employee recognizes that he or she has not earned a minimum wage for whatever reason, a bad night, they're guaranteed the minimum wage already. So here we're interfering with that. And I think adding confusion to a process that works. I did, and I want to be sympathetic to the fact that I did listen to several of the of people providing testimony, talking about sexual advances, and one lady I recall, had a patron who asked her to take off her mask, and that's how her tip was going to be determined. And quite frankly, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing behavior. I'm just not sure how what we're doing here is going to change that type of behavior. People are going to behave, poorly, regardless of our involvement in this tipped wage. My wife was a server back in our earlier days of being married, and obviously I would not want her to go through an experience like that, but I'm not sure how, that's relevant to what we're talking about here. I'm also cognizant of the fact, when we go out to dinner, there are male servers, female, of all ages, all sizes, all races, who take care of us. And so I'm not sure, I don't think this is just, that's certainly that's embarrassing behavior. That's all I can say. I wouldn't want one of my kids to go through that. I'm just not sure how this is going to affect that. I will also mention that we had testimony from the Connecticut Restaurant Association, where they did a poll among their members, and their wait staff, servers, as you will, are making north of $27 an hour currently, average statewide, and bartenders are over 30. I think it was $31 or $32 an hour. And I think by us getting involved, I will state that we don't belong here making this determination on tipped wages. We're interfering in a process that's working very well for some, and I fear that we could really mess it up for those who are performing well, who are good at their craft, and we're penalizing those people. So I'll leave it there. I think we're definitely interfering where we don't belong, setting a precedent here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Yacarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've been listening, and I listened to part of the public hearing, and I have quite a few friends that are in they're waiters, waitresses, bartenders, and now one of them wants to change that. They most make over $30 an hour, $32, $38 an hour. But I'll point out, New York City tried this within the last 10 years, and they really thought they were going to help everybody just in the city. And what happened is that the restaurants business were down, the wait staff and bartenders and waitresses, they wanted to go back to the old system. They were making much, much less money. And I could guarantee, and I think if the owner of the business pays minimum wage, if this was to pass, they could determine in their restaurant or bar that no tips are required. It's optional. They'll charge 8 or 10 or 12% fee to make up the cost of their labor costs. And the food will go up without a doubt. Beverages will go up without a doubt. Our wait staff, waiters, and waitresses will make probably 30% less money than they're making now. And like it or not, many of them take some cash, and that's their business, but they probably have 10 or 15 or 20% cash. That's all going to go away. We're well intended. You're really going to hurt, I believe, the restaurant industry, the entertainment and leisure industry. And at the end of the day, our men and women that work very hard to make a good living, either go to school or second job or their full-time job. And I think what will happen in Connecticut is what happened in New York City. They went back to the old way. Everything, all the costs will go up. You'll have, I think, fewer staff, and I think people will make less money. So I cannot support this. I don't want to see any misbehavior by anybody at a restaurant or bar. Unfortunately, people do foolish things, but hopefully that's very rare. And it should never happen. It should never happen in the first place. But passing this, if this was to ever pass and be implemented, I think you'll see quite a few upset waiters, wait staff, and bartenders and customers. At the end of the day, everybody. I don't think you're going to please anybody, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion made and seconded on agenda item 8, Senate Bill 1177, an act concerning one fair wage. The motion is to JFS this to the floor. The LCO is 6217. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera,
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Senator Sampson,
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert,
No.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weirs, no.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino's no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now move on to item 9, SB 1178, an act expanding Connecticut paid sick days. The motion is to JFS to the floor. May I have a motion?
Rep Hughes so moved.
Moved by Wilson, seconded by
Seconded.
Representative Hughes. So the bill expands the state's current paid sick leave laws in numerous ways. Among them, extending it to cover all private sector employers and employees, except certain union construction contractors and employers. A second thing is broadening the range of family members for whom an employee may use the leave. 3, increasing the rate at which employees accrue leave and removing the waiting period before they may use it, and broadening the reasons employees may use the leave to include events such as employers' closure due to a public health emergency. What we see in the S language, LCO 5181, changes the effective date from July 1, 2023 to October 1, 2023. Brief summaries. Yep, I'll leave it there. Any discussion? Representative Ackert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to, what I'm doing is looking through the two bills that are essentially very, very similar, except you hit a topic or an area that I question, and that is the carve out for the construction trade personnel, and I'm sure that there's an answer to this. So why is there a carve out at all through you, Mr. Chair?
I will defer to Senator Kushner. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my understanding that in many cases where there are collective bargaining agreements and multi-employer trust funds, there are benefits, including negotiated into wages that are then calculated into the benefits paid to the welfare funds. And so they have another, as you well know, because you're very familiar with this industry, they have other ways of addressing these issues through collective bargaining. So that would not be, we wouldn't want to interfere with those contracts as they currently exist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then this isn't like the benefit component of prevailing wage. Is that not correct? It's not that, right? This is their benefit package that they provide now. Is that correct? Not a prevailing wage benefit package, correct?
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that you're correct. It's not about the prevailing wage issues. It's about the benefits that they've negotiated.
Okay, and thank you. So now on the private sector then, which, I mean, obviously could be private sector in cases, but in the private sector, if you currently provide benefits, like in my business, I do personal time off. Can be used in any fashion that they want to use it with. It doesn't specifically say sick days. It says personal time off that they can use. And I present that at the beginning of the year. probably should do it differently, but I just say, here you go, you get, this many days off, this many weeks off, and use, and it's hours, it's in by hours, not by days. Wouldn't that not be the similar, as, and I believe that would be that they would not also have to provide this. Is that correct?
Representative, let me just look through my notes for a second, and get that answer to you. Pause for a second. Thank you. I think we have the answer, Representative Ackert. I'll defer to Senator Kushner.
Just wanted to be sure that if an employer offers paid time off, as some do, for multiple uses, as long as it accrues at the same rate as required under the statute, it would be considered paid sick time. Or so they would, a construction employer, the same as another employer in the instance that you gave, would be able to use the paid time off as time required under the statute.
Thank you. And typically, depending on the company, they may have a time frame. When they start the new employee may not get a lot of vacation time to start right off with, or PTO, we'll say, or sick days. So, I'm comparing the two, and it looks like this one you can gain up to, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me, up to 80 hours. So 2 weeks in this case, in this legislation, 1178, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that you could carry over a portion of that to the following year. Would that then you could continually to accrue that year after year? So if you didn't use sick time, and then the following year you can accrue another 2 weeks or 80 hours, and then that I believe it was 40 hours accrues to the following year. Is that correct? And you can continue to build that up. Is that?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative.
Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just like to contrast a couple of different situations, having been in the construction trades. As an employer, we got to the point where we could offer most of our employees, non-hourly employees, discretionary time off. And that was basically the policy was take as much as you want or you need for your family. Don't abuse it and get your job done. And I know that's really the cliff notes right there. But that was something that we were fortunate enough to do in the environment that we had. And we had people, I don't think we were ever taken advantage of. People had a Well, we didn't have quotas, I'll tell you that, but we had delivery, products that needed to be delivered and jobs that needed to be completed. And our employees who, have and had the integrity to not to take advantage of that, and it worked very well. But then I contrast that with maybe one of our subcontractors who was a roofer, and they may get 4 or 5 days of rain in a row, projects to complete, and they have to be much more guarded about how they can hand out paid time off and vacation time and that sort of thing. And they may be working 7 days in a row when it's sunny because there are projects to get done. So I'm just concerned with how we have a creep here of mandating more mandates about how this is going to go, increasing the time available. And I really think we should be leaving this to more to between the employee and the employer to make sure that they're able to work it out. So I can't support this in its current state. Furthermore, we had a testimony from many different business and industry groups who came before us, including Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and Connecticut Cost Association of Small Towns. Private and public entities came before us to say how this is going to harm their ability to operate in one way or the other. I think that's been discarded. If we're voting yes for this today, we're disregarding that testimony of some of the largest employers in the state. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Weir. Any further questions? Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me, I was trying to find something I had highlighted in the text of the bill, but I can't seem to find it. But I think that may be because I've had multiple different copies of the bill. So who knows where that went. Yeah, I'll just expand on some of the comments of my colleagues. The fact of the matter is that every work arrangement is different. I think that this bill kind of envisions a typical employer employment arrangement, that people work regular hours, they're in some sort of office environment, or they're in some sort of, work arrangement that is regular, can be, predictable, that sort of thing. And the fact of the matter is that it's not necessarily how the world is. There's a lot of different types of employment opportunities that exist in the world. And I know from my own personal circumstances that many times in the past, when I've been offered benefits by employers, I've told them I don't want the benefit. I'd rather have more pay. Give me the money. I will take that, and I will manage my own benefits the way that I choose. And, more and more, the state is coming along to suggest that, because they're always trying to help someone, we've got to come in and tell people how they're going to be helped, whether they want to be or not. And the fact of the matter is there's people out on the street that don't want these benefits. Or if they do want them, they want to be able to pick and choose how they purchase them in a private marketplace arrangement. They want to be able to negotiate these items with their employer versus other types of compensation. And we're just slowly but surely eroding any of that legitimate freedom between those parties to pursue their best solution, and for them to work together to find a solution that's outside this framework that we are constantly modifying and providing for them. Many of the same people that put these policies forward are also the same people that say that capitalism fails in some regards. And I always find that ironic, because effectively every one of these policies that is enacted is effectively undermining capitalism. Capitalism could be defined as nothing more than the free exchange of goods and services between voluntary participants. It's freedom, in other words. It's the fact that people can make business arrangements with one another and exchange goods and services because they want to. But the fact of the matter is that when the state is forever interfering with that ability to have that freedom to negotiate the terms of some sort of exchange of goods and services, you don't have freedom anymore, and you don't have capitalism anymore. So I just hope people will remember that before they start attacking capitalism. That's not what it is. Yeah, but capitalism only occurs with the sense of freedom and not government intervention. This is a big bill. There's a lot of underlying sections in here. This policy is worth a very, very lengthy negotiation, especially since it appears effectively twice on today's agenda, because there are two bills. The governor's bill, which I think is the last item, is almost an exact mirror of this one, except for maybe some of the terms. But we've heard testimony from business owners who said, this is pretty onerous in how you're suggesting we are supposed to play our part in this policy framework. And they mentioned, obviously, the cost of being able to provide these types of benefits and how fast these benefits accrue, the change in how available the benefits are. There used to be a waiting period. That waiting period is being eliminated in this policy. And that's just the surface level stuff that I think would deter folks from starting a business. You know how many people I talk to who have an interest in starting some type of small shop? I talked to a woman the other day who she wants to start a business selling weight loss products. And her issue was, she went just shopping for insurance and then calling the Secretary of State's office and figuring out what type of, business licensing she needs and things like that. And it's like on and on. And she just threw up her hands and said, forget it. This is ridiculous. It's overwhelming. People wonder why everything that we are purchasing comes from China. They wonder why that is. Well, this is why. Because in China, they don't put these types of restrictions on their people. Now, that doesn't mean that China is a better place. It just means that you're telling American, Connecticut business owners, manufacturers, providers of goods and services that they have to compete with a China that doesn't have any of the requirements we would have in America, let alone human rights abuses and public safety and the safety of their employees or any of that stuff. But on top of that, we're going to not only tell our American manufacturers and business people and providers that they have to follow along with this type of arbitrary benefits that are just thought up by a few people who happen to serve in government. That's not how our system is supposed to work. I keep reminding everyone that we are representatives of our constituents. Our constituents should be allowed to make their own decisions. We work for them. We shouldn't be deciding everything for them. And this is another bill where we're deciding for the people on the street what the best arrangement for them is. If they come up with this arrangement on their own, that's fine. But there are plenty of people that would come up with a different arrangement that might be more beneficial to an employee or more beneficial to an employer, or just plain different. In the sense that, as I mentioned, for me, I'm the guy who would say, you know what, really don't give me those benefits. Just give me a little extra pay. That's something I would prefer. But as we create policy that removes choices, removes freedom, and that's what's happening here. Make no mistake. It's an impediment on freedom, not just the employer. Every one of these bills on this agenda is an impediment of freedom on the employee too, because it eliminates their ability to negotiate terms on their own that might be better. I noticed, by the way, that I think in this bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the state of Connecticut required to participate in this policy, Mr. Chairman?
Senator, give me 1 second. Let me try to find that answer for you. Thank you. Senator, I got you an answer. It's just private sector.
Thank you very much. That was the part of the bill that I was trying to find highlighted earlier. And isn't that convenient? You know, the state doesn't have to live by any of its own rules. And I'm not surprised by that. Anyway, at some point, if one of these bills or both of these bills gets melded into some final product and it makes it before the Senate, I can promise you that this will be a very lengthy conversation. Because I think that if you're going to do a policy like this, you've got to provide opportunity for people, both employers and employees, to make their own choices on how far or how much they want to participate. And making a one-size-fits-all blanket policy that arbitrarily imposes this benefit structure on people is wrong. There are a lot of other issues with the bill. I think it's a disincentive to business overall. I think I made that pretty clear. But even some of the other things outside of just the policy on its face, but the requirement for employers to maintain data. And if they can't come up with their data that they're supposed to save for 3 years, it's assumed that they are in violation and so on. And now you've got the attorney general breathing down their neck, et cetera, just like a similar bill that we had today. This is just the kind of thing that is going to tell people not to do business in our state. And before I forget, I just want to address one other small section of this bill that came to my attention. That's on lines 210 through 214. And it reads, relating to the accrual and use of paid sick leave, the personal care attendant workforce council established under section blah, blah, blah shall be considered an employer of any personal care attendants as defined in section 17, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah. This raised the hairs on the back of my neck when I read it for the simple fact that, you know, I've been in this legislature long enough to remember before there was a personal care attendants workforce council and before personal care attendants were made employees of the state of Connecticut for the singular and express purposes of putting them into a public sector employee union. Just for the benefit of the people in this room, I want to just talk about personal care attendants and how this system works currently and how it should work. And that is that, you know, a long time ago, some very smart and very capable people, and including some people that I know personally and I'm very friendly with, came up with a very brilliant idea, which was to take people that are in nursing homes and give them an opportunity to stay home and age in place by creating something called the Medicare Waiver Program, which was effectively the ability to use money that would keep people in a nursing home so that they could use that money to hire people to take care of themselves. And effectively that benefit was for that disabled person. And that disabled person would have the opportunity to expend those funds to hire employees, personal care attendants, to take care of them. But it was understood that the benefit was for that disabled person, and it was understood that the employee worked for that disabled person because they cared for them. As a matter of practice, the state government, of course, doesn't trust anyone with money, so they would send the money directly to the personal care attendant as opposed to the employer themselves to skip that step. Well, there was a movement about 10 years ago to use this quirk that says that these checks are coming from the state to these personal care attendants as an excuse to put them in an employee union and to extract dues for that purpose. The same thing happened to daycare providers at the same time. Daycare providers, obviously, individuals caring for children of other parents. And of course, the Care for Kids program in the state would cut the check directly to the daycare, even though it was for the parents of the children. And therefore, the state, again, put those folks in a union also because they receive checks from the state, even though they don't actually work for the state in any way, shape, or form, or are not connected in any way, shape, or form. And that's what's gone on in this state since, is that these personal care attendants have been in this union, even though they're completely disconnected. They are not connected by anything other than they all happen to receive checks from the state because they happen to be in the employ of disabled folks who actually receive benefits under the Medicaid waiver program. And what concerns me more than anything is that the people that I'm referring to are very, very concerned about their quality of care, as you can imagine. And they want to retain care and control over who they hire as personal care attendants to take care of them. And I am very concerned that this language in this bill, even though it's an unrelated topic, makes a policy change that endangers that relationship by suggesting that the Personal Care Attendant Workforce Council established under a certain statute shall be considered an employer of any personal care attendants. Well, they are not the employer. The employer is the person receiving the Medicaid waiver program benefit. And I'm hopeful that that can be changed going forward, and me bringing this to the attention of the committee and the chairs is taken seriously, because I do think that it does jeopardize that relationship, and the potential is there for those folks in that program to suffer. And I would hate to see that happen. I know many people that are in that program, and they are fine and amazing and impressive people that deserve to maintain the autonomy that they have now and the decision-making authority that they have. I know I got a little off track from the underlying bill. But again, as I said, this is a lengthy bill, and I will refrain from going too deeply into the complete language that is before us today, just to suggest that I hope I never have to. I'll be a no today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Can I pause briefly? Small recess. Yep, Senator Kushner.
Thank you. And I just want to briefly speak to the issue raised about the lines 210 to 214 in the Personal Care Attendant Workforce Council. I think it's an important program, an important construct in the state, and was, as described by Senator Sampson, carefully constructed. And the intention here is not to alter that relationship, other than in the case of providing a vehicle for paid sick days for personal care attendants. So if there's a more artful way to say it and ensure that it's not construed as providing any other authority to the council, I think we can probably figure that out. But that is, the intention is just for purposes of making sure that personal care attendants get the benefit of this of paid sick days without changing the employer relationship or responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Don't see any hands. All right. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 9, Senate Bill 1178, an act expanding Connecticut paid sick days. The motion is to JFS the bill to the floor. The relevant LCO is 6125. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera, Senator Sampson,
Senator Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert,
No.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weirs, no.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino is no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We are going to move on to item 12 and then come back to item 10. So I will move on to item 12, HB 6668, enact modernizing the paid sick day statutes. JF to the floor. May I have a motion?
Rep. Hughes so moved.
So moved by everybody. So moved by Senator Kushner, seconded by Representative Hughes. This is the governor's bill modernizing paid sick days. The heart of the bill, it expands it to businesses of all sizes in all industries, not just service workers. It does other things like expands the range of family members to be used for, increases the rate at which employees accrue leave, and broadens the reasons employees may use that leave. Discussion. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to comment briefly that the state of Connecticut passed its first paid sick leave bill. I believe it was 2011. And since that time, we've seen many states pass paid sick days bills that have surpassed us in terms of the impact on the working population. And it is interesting, not surprising, that there are two versions of this bill, the governor's bill and a bill raised by the committee, because there's, I think, general agreement that we need to update our policies and our practices and our requirements with regard to paid sick days. The governor's bill and the committee bill are not totally aligned, but I do believe over the course of the next several weeks, we will have those discussions and look toward alignment and making sure that we can move new legislation through the chambers, both chambers, and have it signed into law this year. So for that reason, I encourage and urge all of committee members to vote yes on the governor's bill to expand paid sick days. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ackert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably to my colleagues on my side, I'm in support of this legislation, but I want to work on it. So in this case, it looks like where a employee can gain, and you can, I'll ask this in a form of question, they can gain 40 hours of sick time in a year. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
That is correct.
And if they don't use those 40 hours or any portion of that, they can accrue them and put those into the following year. Is that also correct?
I believe that is correct.
Thank you. And in this case, it looks like that the individual, the employee, can only use 40 hours in a calendar year. Do you read that as being correct?
That is correct.
And I believe this is similar legislation, I mean, similar to the question I had asked on the prior bill, in which if you have any other way that an individual can use, take sick time, whether it's through a personal time off or any other way, that is suffices and meets this legislation. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I apologize.
It's probably the way I asked it. So if somebody has personal time off, or another term that they use, that they're allowed to use those hours as if they were using sick time hours, that would count as being satisfied by the Department of Labor.
That is my understanding.
Thank you. I just think that this bill's a little cleaner. What I'm going to do, though, is do my due diligence before it gets to the House floor, and ask those that are in the trades and others that how this would have an impact in them. But I think in most cases, an employer to maintain the employees that they want to keep provides some type of personal time off. Before I get to the discussion, in the House floor, I will clarify that. But at this time, I'm a yes, but potentially be a no on the floor if somehow these become, commingled, and I won't support some of the legislation. But at this time, I'm a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative. Look forward to working with you on it. Any further discussion? Any further discussions? I don't see any hands. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 12, House Bill 6668, an act modernizing the paid sick day statutes. The motion is to JF this bill to the floor. Senator Kushner,
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez,
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson,
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera, Senator Sampson,
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert.
Yes.
Representative Belton,
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall, Representative Hughes,
Representative Hughes is a yes.
Senator Lesser, Representative Weir,
Rep. Weirs, no.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino is going to pass for now. I'll come back to you.
Understood?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item 10, HB 6792, an act concerning wage theft responsibility. The motion is to JFS to the floor. May I have a motion? So moved by Representative Wilson,
Second.
seconded by Senator Kushner. Current contractors, just to give a brief synopsis. Current contractors can be held liable for the wage theft of subcontractors on federal and state prevailing rate projects. This bill extends that liability to private construction. We have substitute language, LCO 6221. Let me just get to that. My apologies. Just want to make sure I read it. Page is that on? I got it. Bear with me 1 second. Got it right here. Yep. Thank you. The substitute language shortens the look back period from 3 to 2 years, eliminates a labor organization representing an employee from the entity's owed wages, which can trigger the bill's provisions, eliminates benefits from the items that our contractor can be held liable for, adds a requirement for the employee and employees designee to give notice of the alleged violation to the contractor at least 10 days before bringing on civil action, and a minor change. Discussion. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. An act concerning wage theft responsibility. It was noted that this practice is already required in the case of a prevailing wage municipal or state project. And that makes perfect sense because we're dealing with taxpayer money. And when there's taxpayer money involved, the taxpayers, the citizens have a right to know how that money is spent. And that's why the existing law requires that all of the parties, the contractor, the subcontractors, all have to file reports certifying the payments that were made so that they all can be verified to meet prevailing wage requirements. And that's what also creates the trigger for liability in the case where there is a penalty for someone who fails along that requirement. The difference here is we're talking about the private sector. And in the private sector, there is no such requirement for anyone to verify payments made to subcontractors or the amount of those wages. And there should not be. And in fact, I consider it to be private information, how much the subcontractor pays his employees is nobody's business but the subcontractor and his employees. And this bill, which seems very pleasant on its face that we're going to catch some bad actors who are failing to pay people properly, is really going to undermine contracting in some significant and negative ways by requiring the privacy of these agreements to be made public. And I think it's going to also have a detrimental effect on holding people accountable for things that they have no responsibility for whatsoever. The way I read this bill, and I encourage the chairs, so you can let me know whether I'm right or wrong about this, but this could apply even to a homeowner. In the case that they hire someone to do some work at their home, put windows in their house or something like that, and the person that they hire subcontracts with another entity to do the labor. If that contractor fails to pay them off, ultimately the homeowner is seen as a general contractor in this language. And now the general contractor can end up, the homeowner could end up with a lien on their home through no fault of their own, simply because they hired someone to do some work for them. And obviously that is the same case in industry, but I use the homeowner example as a way to just show how implausible it is to suggest that someone should be responsible for transactions outside of their own. You know, if I hire someone to do work for me and there are requirements in the law as far as how that payment is supposed to be made, that's on me and the other person involved in that transaction. But if I hire someone to do a job for me and they turn around and hire someone else to do the work, I don't see how I'm responsible for that. And I think that this law is in search of a problem that doesn't really exist, number one. And I also think that it was not even understood by the people that came up with this idea to begin with, that the reason why this information exists is because we're talking about public money in the case of prevailing wage construction projects. There was some very excellent testimony provided in opposition to this bill. And they said many of the same things that I just did. In fact, there's a quote here from ABC Connecticut, the Associated Builders and Contractors, says the reporting requirements in this bill will force subcontractors to disclose sensitive wage and benefit information that's meant to be kept between the employer and employee. It represents a violation of the privacy of both the subcontractor and the employee. And I couldn't agree more. That information is not public information and it's nobody's business. And I think making homeowners and other contractors liable for the actions of others in these circumstances is unnecessary. There is already a mechanism in our law for this. It's one of the few places where government should exist, which is to settle disputes between individuals when they engage in contracting to make sure that people live up to their side of a private contract. There's no need for this legislation, Mr. Chairman. And I also think that it is going to have some unintended and very negative consequences for people who are not in this industry regularly enough to understand the implications of simply hiring someone to do some work for them. And I also believe that there is a real significant danger to how private contracting operates and why it's private contracting and not public contracting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ackert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, and we get it. There are, possibly some bad actors out there that maybe they can't follow the prevailing wage standards that they're supposed to follow and don't pay the amount of wages that they're supposed to and are held liable for that. My concern with this is, there's comment made, well, that contractors should know who he's hiring for, he or she is hiring for a subcontractor. That makes good sense, except this building has implemented regulations and mandates that the contractor can't just hire folks that they know because they have to meet certain requirements under the Commission of Human Rights and Opportunities, and find that at a point where we had a situation in our community where we had a bridge being built and they had to have fencing put in, and the fencing contractor was one that was that they could find, because you couldn't find one. They had to meet the requirements of Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities for required employment, who they have to hire to meet their standards. So they hired this fencing contractor, and the fencing contractor didn't meet their time frame. And that time frame imposed fines on the contractor, who there's nothing he could do, or that in the company could do, to say, I need you there. Well, and I can't hire outside of that because hiring you gets me in, it doesn't create fines for me in another area. So I've got to pay a daily fine because you're not meeting the deadline and you're the one I have a contract with. So sometimes we impose these regulations. So I could see if we said, hey, listen, contractor A, you're hiring your individuals that you know and trust, and you're going to pay your wages, but sometimes they don't have that liberty, that they have to go outside and hire individuals that meet mandates that we've imposed on them for hiring requirements and contracting requirements. So just for that only reason is that sometimes it's out of the control of the general contractor, that they have to hire companies. In this day and age, it's just to get quotes. I could tell you on a weekly basis how many contractors reach out to me and then please bid this. We don't have somebody in your category to bid the jobs. So right now, I think it would impose a hardship on a contractor to say that you not only have to pay your regular obligations, but now you have to make up for the contractor that's not paying their wages. So I just, maybe that's why getting more wage inspectors it will be a value to us that we can offset that. But right now I'm a no on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listening to the comments by my colleagues, I have played the part of a general contractor as well as developed and built a couple of my own homes by hiring subcontractors. And I think we talked about being punitive to the large companies before. I think this would, if people understood the ramifications of what this meant, this would scare the daylights out of any private citizen homeowner trying to make a decision on how to hire a contractor. This is definitely something I'll be discussing at my town hall meetings and see what my constituents think about this, because right now we have remedies through the Department of Consumer Protection. You've got remedies through the court. You've got remedies through the Department of Labor already. Maybe not for, I guess it might be a different agency depending on the situation. But to come in here and say that I, as a homeowner, potentially could be responsible for the actions of a contractor who I hire, that contractor is responsible for, that contractor is responsible for paying the employee. And then to have an issue where the employee could come back after me, having paid my bill, that's, we're not in a court of law here, but that's double jeopardy. And I can't imagine, we had many of the contracting companies come out and oppose this. Looking here, I wonder what the Department of Insurance would say about this. Could insurance companies be liable? Could a homeowner make a homeowner's claim, driving up their policies eventually, ultimately? So I think with this is really, the deeper we dig into this is pretty concerning that this could get right down to the very constituents I'm here to represent, right in their own front yard, or inside the front door is probably more appropriate. So I'll be a no on this, and I will be certainly bringing this up, and I'll be asking my constituents to make sure that they let the entire legislature know what they think about this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 10, House Bill 6792, an act concerning wage theft responsibility. The motion is to JFS the bill to the floor. The relevant LCO is 6221. Senator Kushner.
Senator Kushner votes yes.
Representative Sanchez.
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson.
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera. Senator Sampson.
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert.
No.
Representative Belton.
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall. Representative Hughes.
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser. Representative Weir.
Rep. Weir's no.
Representative Yakarino.
Representative Yakarino is no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will now move on to item 11, our last item on the agenda, HB 6860, enact extending Connecticut premium pay to certain essential workers, JFS, to the floor. May I have a motion?
Rep Hughes so moved.
Rep Hughes so moved and seconded by Representative Wilson. So the purpose of this is to extend the Connecticut premium pay program to certain essential workers. Currently, we have two classes, 1A and 1B. 1A is healthcare and long-term care facility residents. 1B, people 75 years of age and older and frontline workers. And this essentially would extend that to 1C, applicants who would be 65 to 74 and people within the ages of 16 to 64 with high-risk medical conditions and essential workers not recommended in phase 1A and 1B. The S language, just going to that right now, LCO 6127 requires 1C applicants to meet all the same eligibility criteria as other eligible applicants. I worked from 3/10/20 through 5/17/22 and couldn't work at home. And so essentially this bill extends the deadline to stop paying out benefits from June 30th, 2024 to June 2025. Discussion. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just reading through the bill, I'm a little confused about a couple of things. For one, I understand we're trying to capture folks beyond the original 1A and 1B. And I see the way the bill does it is by let's capture 1C and then let's capture everyone else. But for me, everyone else captures 1C too. So I don't know why the bill is written that way, really. But that's neither here nor there. I guess the more important questions are, how many people are we expecting this to cover, Mr. Chairman?
I'm not sure of that, actually. Let me pause for a second, see if I can get you an answer, Senator. Senator, I do not believe we have that number right now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As I was just saying to your co-chair, that's why I asked the question, because I don't think that there's anyone who really understands what the implementation of this really looks like. We don't know how many people. We know it's a large amount of people, but I don't know whether that number is, 50,000 or 500,000 or more. I don't really even know the number of people. And I think that without having that information, I think it's irresponsible to even take a step in advance. Do we know how much this is likely to cost, Mr. Chair?
We do not, Senator.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I'm forgive me for putting you guys on the spot. I don't do that. I'm simply trying to illustrate the fact that no one knows how many people will be covered, and therefore we don't know how much the cost will be. Do we know where the money will come from to pay for this policy if it is enacted?
I'll defer that question to Senator Kushner.
I'm assuming that those dollars could come from general fund or from any remaining ARPA dollars. I would assume the federal government would allow expenditure for that, since originally it was part of the Congress's intention to use these dollars for what some people called heroes pay. And this would be the purpose we would be using it for.
Thank you for that answer, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'm certainly sympathetic to the goal of the legislation. I just think that, before we are looking at, passing it as a joint favorable out of this committee, we should have some of the necessary information. We should have a real understanding of where the money is coming from. Certainly, if there is ARPA funds that are available, I think that that is a perfectly suitable use for those funds. The question is, I don't know that anybody on this committee knows if there are ARPA funds that could be set aside for this, what the extent of them are and how much of this would cover. And the alternative is to take the money from the general fund, which effectively means the taxpayers of the state of Connecticut. And not that the ARPA funds are not the taxpayers' money too. That's everyone's taxes generated there. I find this to be a very irresponsible bill at this point, without knowing the number of people impacted or potentially eligible to receive a benefit, and therefore how much it will cost or where the money is truly going to come from. And the fact of the matter is, just let the people keep their money. If you're going to take money out of the general fund to give it back to them in the form of this premium pay, then just let people keep their money, is my opinion. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ackert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have similar concerns on one of the questions I would have, though, to start with. Do we know if all the individuals that applied in 1A and 1B received their payments in full as the legislation gives the numbers? Do we know that?
I do not. I will defer to Senator Kushner.
I just want to be specific. I don't believe everyone who applied received funds, because not everyone was eligible who applied. But I believe that those that were found eligible have received their funds. Now, I know from my own experience as a legislator, I'm getting some questions from people who think they should have received funds and have not yet received them. And of course, we're going to the comptroller's office for each one of those constituents and determining whether they had an eligibility, whether they in fact completed their application. There's a lot of components to it, but I believe the others have received their funds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things I want to find out is a couple, where's the money coming from for this? If in fact 1A and 1B have received their funds that applied and were qualified for those. And then the potential cost would be who's eligible for this. And it seems like there's a substantial amount of people that fall under 1C for this. So that doesn't mean I wouldn't vote for it on the floor with that information provided, but at this time I'm going to be a no vote in committee.
Thank you for your any further discussion. Representative Weir.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. On, I guess I'll start with line 5. And it also is on line 26, where it talks about a person who's eligible, and it looks like subsection, let me go, I'll just start with line 5 so we can stay on the same page. A, subsection I, says worked during the entire period of the public health and civil preparedness emergency declared by the governor. So when we talk about worked, does that mean was employed during that time, or, I think there's a difference. We had people out, COVID for, to be out for 2 or 3 weeks, incapacitated, and then they would come back. So do they have to be, consecutive weeks? Is there any, what does worked mean through you, Mr. Chair?
I believe as long as they were working during that period of time that they would be qualified. So I think you're correct.
So worked and employed would be
Worked and employed.
in the same.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? Senator Kushner.
So we spent a great deal of time over the last couple of years talking about the people who worked outside their home during the pandemic. And I know all of us on this committee, regardless of how you're voting today, appreciated that work so much, because we knew that for the most part, we could stay home and be safe, not be exposed to COVID-19, and that many of the people who did leave the home to work, to take care of us, to make sure we had groceries, to make sure that we had healthcare. A lot of those people suffered greatly, and many lost their lives, if not even if they recovered, they often were subjected to what we now call as long haul COVID. And I think that we all really appreciate that service. What was difficult is that we had a lot of discussion for a long period of time. Is how we're going to actually reward or compensate those heroes, besides the signs that we put in our yards, or the sometimes parades that we had in front of a nursing home. And that debate resulted in legislation during special session that created a fund to compensate, pay heroes pay, pandemic pay for certain workers. And unfortunately, what's happened since that time is it's come to our attention that there are a number of individuals working in positions that are very similar to those that received pandemic pay, but they are classified 1C versus being a 1B, so they didn't qualify. And some examples of that I think are very moving. I know I've been very touched by the people who sheltered our homeless during the pandemic. And again, were exposed to COVID-19 in a congregate setting with individuals they didn't know, often with individuals they didn't have a personal relationship to, but they were taking care of people who very much needed protection during a pandemic, at risk to themselves. The people who transported individuals who are non-emergency sick people, but they still needed transport to a doctor's office or to a hospital, but they were non-emergency personnel. They were not classified 1B. There are other categories like this that I think we would all feel very moved and want to see the parity in the treatment that they saw from the state. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to get down to the root of this and find each group of people that I think really were so identical to the people that did receive the pandemic pay. But I think this bill provides a vehicle for getting there. And I would hope people would continue to consider that. I know that if we include everybody in 1C, it's a large group of people. It's very substantial, a substantial cost. And I am not critical of those that used 1A and 1B as a mechanism to determine who would get pandemic pay, because I feel like we were looking for some, definition that we could all put our hands on. But it was imprecise. And I'm not blaming the CDC for that imprecision, because they were dealing with the pandemic, and we all were. But I do feel like we have some glaring examples of people that were left out, and whether or not we can refine that. And by the way, even those that are not identical or very substantially similar to the people that got the pandemic pay, I started out by saying, I think everybody who went to work during the pandemic was taking a risk, even if it was just because they had to stop and get gas and they didn't know who was at the next pump. And I remember, we all probably remember, like not wanting to touch the gas pump at one point during the pandemic, not wanting to stand close to the person like getting gas across from us. And there are people who worked in those gas stations who I know felt very at risk and at peril. So it's really hard to make a cutoff point for this. But I do think that this bill keeps the conversation going, and we don't want to forget people and how much they took care of us and risked their own safety and their own lives and the lives of their loved ones. And so, for that reason, I'm a strong yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Representative Weir.
Thank you. And thank you for that reminder, Senator Kushner, because I do remember those times. Certainly, I also am thankful we had, our employees, and at times I was working shoulder to shoulder with them in some of the nursing homes, setting up containment and creating COVID wards. So I do remember the sacrifices and the risks that for the most part, our employees put themselves at me at times, but certainly not to the level that these wonderful people did. I would also state that we made concessions for that, or made arrangements for that by, privately, proactively offering them, hazard pay for different, we do it under certain conditions today, and COVID was something new back then. And so, you know, in addition to making sure that they were as safe as they could be, wearing personal protective equipment and respirators and all that, we paid them a premium for being involved in that situation. So, Mr. Chair, is there any consideration if an employee received that type of pay, kind of above and beyond from the private employer, or this really doesn't take that into consideration, Mr. Chair?
I don't believe so, Representative. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
A roll call vote has been requested and a motion duly made and seconded on agenda item 11. House Bill 6860, an act extending Connecticut premium pay to certain essential workers. The motion is to JFS this bill to the floor, and the respective LCO is 6127. Senator Kushner. Representative Sanchez.
Representative Sanchez votes yes.
Representative Wilson.
Representative Wilson votes yes.
Senator Cabrera. Senator Sampson.
Sampson is no.
Representative Ackert.
No.
Representative Belton.
Representative Belton votes yes.
Representative Hall. Representative Hughes.
Representative Hughes votes yes.
Senator Lesser. Representative Weir. Representative Weir.
Rep. Weir's no.
Representative Yakarino.
Yakarino is no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The next item on today's agenda is the time and date of our next meeting. There will be a committee meeting on Thursday, March 23rd in this room, room 2B, at 12 p.m. Without objection, attendance and votes will be held open until 5 p.m. Hearing no, nope, I don't hear any objection. The committee will recess. Have a nice day, everybody.
Hello, Representative Yakarino.
Hi, thank you. I was waiting for you.
I believe you missed one or two votes. Let me just check quickly.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think agenda item 1, would you like me to read the bill numbers?
Please. Should be 21.
Agenda item 1 is Senate Bill 21. Yes.
I'm a
JM
no.
to the floor. You're a no? Okay. Let me just go through the others quickly, make sure I've got everything here.
I think I only missed 6668.
That is correct.
What was the bill? I don't have my, what was the title of that bill again?
6668, an act modernizing the paid sick day statutes.
Oh, it's the governor's bill.
Yes.
I'll vote yeah. I mean, I'll support it. We'll see what happens before we get to the floor.
I'm sorry, Representative Yakarino, could you repeat that?
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
I'm all set. Thank you. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello, Representative Hall. Oh.
Hello, Representative Paul.
How's it going?
Going well. I'll just check through to see what you've got. Agenda item 1, that would be Senate Bill 21. Motion is to JF to the floor.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Please let me know if you want me to read off any of the titles. Agenda item 2, that is Senate Bill 152, JFS to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 3, that is Senate Bill 228, JF to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 4, House Bill 5854, JF to the floor. JF to appropriations, sorry.
They have two appropriations. Yep. Yes.
Agenda item 5, House Bill 5858, JF to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 7, Senate Bill 1120, JF to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 8, Senate Bill 1177, JFS to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 9, Senate Bill 1178, JFS to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 12, that would be House Bill 6668, JF to the floor.
Yes.
Agenda item 10, Senate House Bill 6792, JFS to the floor.
Yes.
And agenda item 11, House Bill 6860, JFS to the floor.
Yes.
Thank you, Representative.
Take care.
You too.
How are you?
Hello, Senator Cabrera.
How you doing?
Good. I have you missing 4 votes towards the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Agenda number 9, Senate Bill 1178, JFS to the floor.
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Okay, and let me know if you want me to read any of the titles.
Okay.
Item number 12, House Bill 6668, JF to the floor.
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Agenda item 10, House Bill 6792, JFS to the floor.
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
And lastly, agenda item 11, House Bill 6860, JFS to the floor.
Senator Cabrera votes yes.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good day.